So as I said, welcome everybody to our August webinar. Can you believe it's August already? Today we have Katherine Wagner, who is part of the Leap Well clinical team. She is a registered psychologist with 20 years experience supporting people in mental health, communication, and resilience. Katherine regularly provides workplace training in the topics of burnout, mindfulness, psychological safety, which is a big one at the moment. We might have to get you to do another one, Katherine. And of course, today's topic, bullying, workplace bullying and harassment. Now, in line with last week's National Week of Action Against Bullying and Violence, we chose to provide you guys with some information on workplace bullying and harassment. Obviously, it's a really big issue. I did pull a stat from Safe Work Australia that in 2021 to 22, 52.2% of mental stress claims at work were due to work-related harassment and or workplace bullying, which is massive. And it's only increased since then. So it's a really important topic for us to discuss and also to provide you with some tools and resources on how to recognize, prevent, and respond to workplace bullying. And that goes for leaders, peers, and bystanders, and how we can, create a safe and supportive environment for everybody that we work with. So that's enough from me. Without further ado, Katherine, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sally, for that, and welcome everybody. Yes, as Sally said, I'm Katherine. I'm a psychologist and corporate trainer, and welcome to our webinar today on safer workplaces, recognising and preventing bullying. Now, what we'll look at for these 30 minutes is what is bullying, but also it's important to step back and just remind ourselves what isn't bullying. Also, we'll look at the impacts of bullying on the individual, the team, and the wider business. We'll also remind ourselves about some of the signs of bullying and how you indeed can check in and support someone who might be experiencing this. And then we'll also talk about how all of us here, no matter what role we have, what can we do to really contribute to a psychologically safe workplace, which sets the tone to prevent bullying. Okay, so let's start with a definition of bullying. Well, look, bullying isn't just a bit of tough feedback or a tough day at work. Safe Work Australia say that workplace bullying occurs when an individual or a group of people repeatedly, so that's a key word, they repeatedly behave in an unreasonable manner towards a worker or another group of workers. And this behaviour can actually create a risk to that person's health and safety or that group's health and safety. Now, unfortunately, bullying still is widespread here in Australia. We know that in 2024, so just last year, the Human Resources Institute did a bit of a study, and they found that over 60% of complaints that were lodged were in relation to perceived bullying and harassment. Also, we know the Australian Workers' Union in 2023, they did a big survey of over 1,000 people, and at least 50% of those people said they had experienced bullying at some point in their career. So we know it's a long-standing issue here in Australia, and it remains something that we do need to keep talking about, raising our awareness around, and indeed knowing what the signs are and how to respond. So once again, I'm really pleased that you've carved out this time to really think about this important topic. Now, so that's what bullying is, but let's just step back for a moment and reflect and think, well, what isn't bullying? Because sometimes there are these situations at work which, may not feel comfortable. They may be a little bit challenging to be involved in, but it doesn't, before we get to that, sorry, everyone, I jumped ahead one slide. Let's just quickly define what the different types of bullying are. So you could say there's more direct forms of bullying, which are more obvious, but there's also the more subtle forms of bullying, and it's important that we remind ourselves of these more subtle forms. Now, when we think about the more direct forms, it could be things like a person being shouted at in front of people, being called names, being sworn at. It could be someone being hit or struck or pushed, or someone just being really ridiculed and humiliated in front of others. And let's remember, bullying is about this repeated and targeted behaviour, which is unreasonable and could reasonably cause harm to a person. Okay, so that's some of the more direct forms, but let's just think about some of the more indirect forms as well. Now, that could include behaviours like isolating someone in the workplace or not including them in perhaps group emails that they should be a part of, or not including someone in work social events like stepping out for lunch with the group but repeatedly leaving someone out. It could also be spreading really malicious rumours about a person at work, online stalking. Now, unfortunately, in the modern world, with all our technology, it really has opened up a lot of avenues for forums where people can be bullied. So, of course, it can happen in the face-to-face context or through, the telephone. But now we also have, private chat rooms, online meetings. So we've just got to be mindful of all these contexts where bullying can play out. Now, some other more indirect forms of bullying could be, repeatedly withholding information from an employee, information that they may well need to do their job well. It may be deliberately and repeatedly changing a roster or a workload to disadvantage someone. So let's just always remind ourselves that bullying sometimes is, yes, very obvious and direct, but it's good to be on the lookout for the more subtle forms, which of course can be still very harmful to a person. And some of you online may have indeed experienced some of these more direct or more direct forms throughout your career. Okay, now just jumping ahead to what bullying isn't, as I alluded to a moment ago. As I mentioned, not all challenging situations at work constitute bullying. So it's important just to remind ourselves of this. So performance management. We know that workers or workplaces, employers, they do have the right to manage employees' performance in order to attain an objective at work. So that may be to improve someone's performance so that they can indeed meet work goals. But the main issue is any work process such as performance management or disciplinary action or a transfer or demotion, this needs to be handled in a fair and equitable way and in a respectful kind of way. So if indeed an employer is, say, performance managing someone, but they're giving the person, forewarning about meetings, they're communicating in a clear and transparent way, they're keeping their tone and behaviour respectful, and they're doing all of this in line with policy, that doesn't mean it's bullying. Now, I know it doesn't mean it feels comfortable, perhaps for the employee involved, but yeah, once again, it doesn't mean it constitutes bullying. Now, also some other things in the workplace just to remind ourselves of. We're not going to be best friends with everyone at work, and I think we all know that this is just the case. It's great when we get along with people and we feel that our colleagues are our friends, but sometimes there will be some differences in opinion or different communication styles or personality styles. But let's remember that unless it's repeated behaviour which is targeted towards an individual and it's unreasonable behaviour and could reasonably cause harm to a person, then it doesn't mean it's bullying. So yeah, I think it's good for us just to step back and kind of separate it out there. Okay, now moving on from that, everybody. So speaking of bullying, it can have really serious impacts on an individual, but also the wider workplace, which we'll get to in a moment. So when we think about the individual, and you may even wish to reflect on a time where you may have experienced some bullying at work, or perhaps you witnessed a colleague going through bullying, it can really affect our mental health and our ability to function. So we know for sure that someone who is experiencing bullying is very likely to feel stress and anxiety. They might ruminate over this situation at work, find it hard to let go and relax even when they're not at work. They may have difficulty, therefore, focusing on their job. And I think we all know that feeling that if you are stressed and preoccupied about something, it is harder to do your job. It's harder to concentrate, make decisions, be creative. It's harder to collaborate. Now, someone experiencing bullying might also start to feel fearful and anxious around other people in the team. So they may start to withdraw, become incommunicative. And also, once again, many of you may relate to this, that when we're chronically stressed, it can affect our physical health as well, potentially. So a person experiencing bullying may need more time off work for other kind of illnesses, maybe their immunity is down, or they're experiencing aches and pains or headaches. And also it can, down the track, lead to some more serious mental health conditions like depression or anxiety, or even suicidal ideation. So look, as it says there, the impacts can be really serious. So I am once again really pleased that all of you have carved out this time to join this webinar, because if we've got to keep raising our awareness around bullying and indeed know how to respond and support someone who could be experiencing this. Now, when we think about bullying and the impacts, as we've just said, it definitely can affect the individual involved, but there is this flow-on effect where it can, for sure, affect the team and the wider business as well. Now, as we just said, if someone is experiencing bullying, they may start to withdraw from the team, not want to be as involved in meetings. They may keep their video off in meetings and just not really contribute. So collaboration starts to, get affected. Also in the team, there might be increased fear and stress. So a person in the team who may witness some bullying going on, or they may just perceive that, yes, someone in the team is looking really anxious about working with this other person, that can flow on to an effect in the team of this reduced psychological safety, where others might start to think, well, could I be next? Am I going to potentially be bullied? So that sense of safety more generally is really reduced. That will lead to, lower morale and engagement, reduced motivation and collaboration. And of course, that doesn't help with business outcomes as well. And also we know broadly it can affect present absenteeism in the workplace, or even presenteeism, which is where a person is at work, but their mind isn't really on the job because they're so caught up with their stress and anxiety about potentially bullying. And there's real risks associated with presenteeism at work, things like making mistakes, forgetting meetings. So there can be some flow-on effects from that as well. Now, everyone, it's not just the human element and impact that, of course, is the most important thing, but we also know that bullying in a workplace can be really costly to the business. We know that in Australia, billions of dollars are spent per year. I believe it's around between $12 and $39 billion are spent on workers' compensation claims to do with psychological injury. And we know that a big proportion of that burden is related to bullying complaints. Now, we also know with workers' compensation claims for psychological injury, they tend to be more expensive and more protracted and longer than physical injury claims. So, yeah, we once again need to be really mindful to try to prevent and address bullying as soon as we can, because it also can really be costly to businesses. Okay, moving on from that, everyone. So this is probably one of the most important parts of today's webinar. How can we support an employee who may be experiencing bullying? Now, you as a bystander in the workplace may, observe that someone is experiencing behaviour that looks like it could be bullying behaviour, or you may just notice a change in a team member at work that gets your attention. And as you all no doubt know with the whole Are You OK campaign, the first thing we need to be mindful of in creating a supportive and safe workplace is trying to be attuned to people around us, or acknowledging people around us at work to the degree that we are going to pick up on signs that they might be struggling. Now, if all of us are so busy doing our own thing and we're not looking at each other and engaging, of course, we may not pick up on the signs as readily. So it's really important to make that commitment when you come to work to think, I'm going to try to look at people in the eye and say hello and check in with people, just so I am aware if potentially there might be a change in their demeanour. Now, of course, we may not always notice it, and that's okay. We can only do the best we can, but it does go a long way just to try to keep some connection with your team and check in with each other. Now, through that process of checking in and observing, you might pick up on some signs like, as you can see there, a team member might just seem really quiet and withdrawn. You may have noticed this over a few days or indeed a few weeks. You might notice that they're avoiding people. Maybe you just don't see them anymore online, whereas normally in a Teams meeting, they'd be there with their video on and chatting away, and you just really don't see them much anymore. You might notice changes in their work performance, more errors, forgetting things. They may need a lot more reassurance, and you think, gee, that's kind of not like them. They normally work pretty independently, but they seem really kind of anxious about their performance. You might see a person just being really jumpy, seeming really anxious about things, or on the other hand, as we said, just withdrawn and disengaged. And the person may be calling in sicker, so once again, you may not see them much, and they might just be seemingly more run down and tired, and you might hear them talking about, oh, I just can't sleep at the moment. So have a think for everybody. They're just a few of the signs you may pick up on, but just think, what else might you pick up on in someone who could be experiencing bullying? Because I think, again, it's important while we're here together now to make that commitment just to be on the lookout at work, to be that person who's observant and might pick up on the signs that someone could really do with a supportive chat. Now, it could even be a change in someone's expression on their face, and you just notice, say, for a full day that they just look really preoccupied and really down. That might be a sign for you to reach out and have a coffee and have a bit of a chat. Okay, so keep thinking about that, everyone. What could be some signs? Okay, so let's imagine we have noticed a change in someone and you're thinking to yourself, yep, the right thing to do is to reach out and have a chat. I just want to check in and, see how they're doing. Now, many of us might shy away from taking that step of actually reaching out and having a conversation because we might be fearful that we don't know what to say. Am I going to say the right thing? Am I intruding? Am I going to make the person feel uncomfortable? I don't know how to solve the problem. I don't know what to do. These thoughts and worries are really normal. So that's why a little bit of preparation can really go a long way to build your confidence so that you can have one of these supportive conversations and do it confidently and with some clarity. So like many things in life, I always say preparation is the key. So in that line of that kind of thinking, I'd say it's really important to check in and see if you have a workplace bullying policy. And if indeed you do, I'd really suggest that you familiarise yourself with it. Have a look at what the definition of bullying is. You may even want to look at the code of conduct. Most importantly, make sure that you're aware of what the steps are for a person to take if they feel they're being bullied. Are there some reporting processes they can follow? And also the next step there, really importantly, it's important for you to check in and think, well, who are the supports here in the workplace if an employee may disclose to you that they feel that they're being bullied. For instance, you may want to check, do you have mental health ambassadors in the workplace, or who are your key HR personnel that would be a good resource, or other key managers. Now, we don't have to do all this preparation really kind of formally, but definitely just spending a few minutes even to check in on these points can make the world of difference to your confidence and how clearly you can hold this conversation. Now, also remember the availability of any other supports like EAP support. And before you approach this person that you're a little concerned about, you may just want to remind yourself, what's gotten your attention? What's made you think this person may not be travelling all that well? And always think about observable behaviours here. Have you noticed that they seem quieter? Have you noticed that they just are not at the workplace as much anymore? There's higher absenteeism. Or have you noticed them being a bit tearful here and there? It's always good if we can put a little bit of context to the conversation by letting the person know some of the observable behaviours we've noticed. Just kind of makes it feel there's a bit more context in why this conversation is occurring. Okay, now the important step is then to take that deep breath and just have that conversation. It may take a little bit of courage, but that's okay. And just think, we need to all become better at having some of these sometimes slightly uncomfortable conversations, because that's what's going to help us to feel more connected and more supported and safer in the workplace. So just take that breath and give it a go. And you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be genuine and present. Now, some other tips for having a conversation, everybody. Please take the pressure off yourself. This could be a little bit of the preparation step, actually, for you to remind yourself to take that pressure off yourself. Your job is not to solve that person's problems. Your job would be to check in, show that you care, and offer some encouragement. So you may also, I think it's quite obvious, but choose your timing and place. You might want to think, how would this person feel most comfortable? Do you sometimes go off-site for a coffee with them, for instance? And that might be the most comfortable thing. Make sure it's a confidential space, though. That's really important. It might be just saying, hey, do you want to go for a walk? Or when you're together in a quiet meeting room without any interruptions, that may be the time to bring up this topic. And obviously, just keep your tone non-judgmental and calm and caring. And the important thing, as you no doubt know, to be a really good communicator, we just need to be able to listen really well, to listen non-judgmentally. And that means putting aside your preconceived ideas and making the commitment to simply be present with that person and see where they're coming from. Now, if the person does share that they're feeling that bullying might be occurring, you may want to gently collaborate with them and provide a bit of encouragement about potential steps forward. Now, remember, if you've checked in and you're aware of what your bullying, say, policy is or reporting process is and who your internal supports are, that would be a good time for you to gently encourage that person to, take some of those steps along those avenues. So you might even suggest to them, hey, have you thought about, keeping notes of what you've been experiencing so you've got that clarity just in case you do want to approach HR or make a report down the track. So you don't want to push, but it's always a good idea to let the person know that there are avenues and steps that they can take. They're not isolated and they're not stuck. But the message is, again, that you don't want to push, but you may play a really important role in encouraging them just to take one small step. Now, something else you may want to do is offer to check in again. I think we all know that feeling of support when someone is genuine and does want to follow up with us. So you might say, hey, can we meet up again in a few days or next week and have a coffee? Or just be good to see how things are going. Now, importantly, everybody, obviously confidentiality is really important. You want to let the person know you appreciate them trusting you and you're keeping it confidential. But sometimes you may need to escalate the situation. Now, that would be if you feel the situation is really deteriorating or the person's mental health seems to be really deteriorating, or you're witnessing behaviour that definitely is not in line with your, code of conduct and dignity and respect policy. That's where you may indeed need to escalate it to a trusted manager or HR and get them to check in. Now, if you're ever unsure of that, it's a good idea to reach out to your employee assistance program to get a bit of guidance and talk things through. Okay, now some questions you may want to ask or things to say. You might just want to say, hey, I just wanted to have a chat because I've noticed you seem a bit quieter lately, and how are you doing? Or if you have witnessed some behaviour that's concerning, you might say to the person, hey, I just noticed that, so-and-so the other day spoke quite harshly to you and I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Have you thought about chatting to your manager? Or, hey, look, we do have a bullying policy in place, would you like me to have a look at it with you? And then once again, would you like to meet up again and check in? Now, everyone, as you no doubt know, it's important just to keep our tone caring and professional, keep that open mindset and just listen really well. They're the key skills really in being able to support someone. Now, remember everyone also, just more broadly, all of us here on the line, no matter what our role is in our workplace, we all have a powerful role and we have a lot of influence in creating a positive workplace culture which can help to prevent bullying occurring. So check in and think to yourself, how can you really encourage dignity and respect at work? Well, some tips would be to, again, know your bullying policy and code of conduct. I think many of us kind of know we have these policies there in place, but we haven't taken the time to really familiarise ourselves with them. But it's a good time to really stop and make that commitment to check in. Also, look, it doesn't take a lot of effort just to be inclusive and to show a bit of kindness to people around us. And I'm sure all of us here today in this webinar really appreciate it when people around us are inclusive towards us and take that time to say hello and make us feel valued. If you do feel you've got an issue with a team member, try to address issues early. That can help prevent things like resentment and misunderstanding occurring and even potentially behaviour that could be perceived as bullying down the track. Now, if you do want to bring up some issues with a person, another tip would be to try to use I statements. Again, a bit of preparation goes a long way. You may want to prepare exactly what's on your mind and why you need to talk to them, and make sure you're using lots of statements like, I just have noticed this, and I could be wrong, but I've noticed that when this happens, I then start to feel anxious, and I just wanted to hear from you, your point of view, and see how we can work together to resolve this. And obviously, everybody, look, if you see bullying behaviour, please do intervene and report it. And if you feel uncomfortable around that, you may want to get some advice from someone trusted at work, or call the Employee Assistance Program, because we do know that bystanders play a crucial role. And if you don't feel comfortable talking to the person who's perpetrating the perceived bullying, you may want to indeed check in on the person who's, at the receiving end. As we said, you've got lots of skills there in how to listen well and show that you care. Now, all of us can lead by example, emulate the types of behaviours you'd like to see around you in the workplace. And look, we can also use touch points that are already there in the workplace, like morning get-togethers or morning meetings or regular meetings every week, really just to be attuned to people around us, be observant and check in and just notice how they're doing. And again, take that chance to check in and say, hey, I'm just wondering how you are, if indeed you are concerned about someone. Now, we do know from the research, and I would encourage you all to look at Safe Work Australia at their website. They have a lot of resources about bullying. And they have found that indeed having a really clear reporting process in place for bullying is really powerful in helping to create more psychological safety in the workplace and prevent the recurrence of bullying. But they've also found the next steps of actually having action plans in place when bullying is reported and following through with those action plans, and also reviewing what processes are in place regularly is really the important steps. Because if we can notice patterns, know what interventions are working and what may not be working, we're only going to improve things moving forward. We're going to help raise awareness about the seriousness of bullying and create more of a psychologically safe culture in the workplace. So, of course, everyone, systems and policies are really important. But once again, all of us as individuals, just our day-to-day behaviour is also either detracting or contributing to a positive workplace culture. So everyone, some final questions for you just to ponder for a moment. What small steps would you like to commit to today to prevent bullying, encourage more of a positive workplace culture? And also, what would you do differently tomorrow if you saw someone being bullied at work? And now on that note, if you had the courage and you felt comfortable, you might approach the person doing that behaviour perhaps privately afterwards and let them know, what you observed and that you think it's not appropriate and could be potentially harmful. But again, that's only if you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable, it may mean getting someone else trusted involved, or even talking to your EAP for a bit of guidance. Okay, so everyone, you've got a few questions there to ponder. Now, moving on, just for the time's sake, I wanted to put it over to you and just ask, are there any questions or reflections that anyone would like to share? Because our half hour really does go fast, doesn't it?
It does.
It
Thanks,
flies.
Katherine. I know, it flies. So much information to get through. If anyone has any questions, you can use the chat or the QA function. I just my 2 cents worth. I really loved your point about just showing kindness to one another. I think that can go a really long way in preventing, conflict from escalating into bullying, as you said. Just looking up and saying hello to someone can make a big difference in their life. I actually had a friend who recently experienced bullying in her workplace, and it took her a really long time to speak up about it. And when she did, other people then shared with her that they had experienced bullying from that same manager. So, you could be the first one to, help other people work through the situations that they went through as well. So I think it's really hard to speak up, but in doing so, you might help someone else as well.
Absolutely. And also, just Sally, on that note, thank you for sharing that. We know that if you are the person checking in on a team member and saying, hey, I'm just wondering how you are, you seem quiet, just that sense of connection and acknowledgement for that other person, we know from the research, is likely to raise that little bit of hope in them that might lead them to then speaking to their manager or someone else. So don't underestimate the power of you just showing that you're present and that you care. So it really encourages help-seeking behaviour.
Yep, I agree. And as Katherine raised a couple of times, calling your EAP, you can utilize the EAP for a really wide range of things. And if, as Katherine said, if you're needing advice on how to start a conversation or how to deal with a certain situation, our counsellors and psychologists have a lot of experience in workplace related issues. So, you don't have to use the full amount of sessions available to you every single time. You can call up and just have that one, utilize that one session to get some advice. I've just popped our 1300 number in the QA function. For anybody, if this has raised anything for you, please give us a call and we can connect you either with Katherine or with one of our other counsellors or psychologists to help you through whatever you're going through. And if there are any HR or business leaders on here that are interested in discussing, maybe having Katherine do some more training at your workplace on this subject or any other subjects, please reach out to your LeapWell partnership manager and we can get that arranged too. So with that, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Katherine. That was really informative. I really enjoyed that, and hopefully we can get you. Sorry, Alicia just said thank you so much. There are people just saying thank you in the chat box. It was really beneficial. Hopefully we can get you around some workplaces to do a little bit more of a deep dive and really get people trained up on how to have these conversations and prevent bullying in the workplace.
Would be wonderful. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for your time, everyone, for having me.
Thanks, Katherine. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. See you next time. Bye.